everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where writers sit around drinking tasty beverages to talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that may not agree, but are lovingly delivered. We will not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. I'm your host today, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 211. Rocking Out with Richard Sparks. Welcome back, Richard.
Thank you for having me back, Jeannie.
I hope all of you out there listeners remember him. He was the one who wrote New Rock, New Roll, and we are here to squee with enthusiasm at the next book in that sequence that just dropped in November. It's called New Rock, New Realm. Okay, I love it. I'm just going to start right there.
Please, go ahead. You know the old joke about all any writer honestly expects from any critic is just 2,000 words of closely reasoned praise.
Exactly. Well, this is very close. I love that you pick up right where you left off, which means that you've created an omnibus edition. Will definitely be worthwhile to put out when this is done.
It'll be a fat one because each book's got, I like a book you can wallow in. When I read one, the way you go, oh, I can't wait to see how this ends. Oh, no, I never want this to end. That's when I know I've got something that I really like as a reader. And that's what I'm attempting to do with the New Rock series.
I loved it in the same way that I love Pirate Abba's The Wandering Inn, which I think there's like 8 million words written in that. And then there's more coming all the time. And I love this general idea because it's progressive fantasy and a little bit of competence porn, all in a beautiful adventure. So if you ever gamed or like adventure or love fantasy, this appeals to so many different kinds of readers. And that's what's cool about it.
That's just so lovely to hear that it's hit the spot. It's not, well, you never want to talk about what something isn't, but there is a genre called Lit RPG, which is about role-playing games. This is actually RPG adjacent slightly in that it comes out of, as you know, it comes out of people winning a game championship, and the next thing they know, they find that they are their avatars for real, in a real new rock, on a new planet, in a new world, playing their avatars, the roles, ROLEs, of their avatars. So that's the excuse for the adventures, and then it's all explained at the end of book one, as you know, and we're set up for the sequels. I've written 4 so far. I'm on 5, and I'm just thrilled that you liked book 2. That's great, Jeannie.
I love it, and I'm just going to need to borrow your laptop for a weekend. No reason. You need to go surfing with your daughter or something. Make it fun. But I love that everybody gets a quest. It's not just main character hero's journey. There are many people that are all on their own quest and all of their own journeys, including good old Commandant Blunt, whom I love with all of my heart.
Oh, Commandant Bastard, everyone, I just adore him. I mean, he's sort of the quest giver in this in a way, but it's not really set up.
Well, it's unintentional, perhaps, that he just tells by stories.
Yeah.
He inspires people. And you have a quote, and I'm going to say the quote out loud. Spoilers for everybody. 2 things any leader can do: prepare and run a happy ship. And when I read that, I literally am like, yes, that is real. That is true. And it's in corporations that, okay, I've been part of some that succeed and some that fail. And it's like, were they prepared? Are they running a happy ship? That's 2 things: prepare and keep people happy.
I mean, anyone can do that. And, this came out of my experience in the script writing, directing, TV, film world, which is where I learnt my trade over 4 decades. A lot of directors don't prepare, and they come to the set and they look one way down the railway line and then the other way, and they say, well, we'll put that camera over here, and you can see the crew going, oh God.
That shocks me a little.
And run a happy ship. There's no reason to be rude to people on set. You're all exhausted, but yes, it's stressful, but you've got to behave with some kind of consideration for other people, even if you're the top man with all the, or top woman with all the stress on your shoulders, all the responsibility. It's I've horror stories I've heard of people being thrown off sets. Get that idiot off my set. Get me someone who can effing act.
Right.
After one take, it's just, it's not right. So, yeah, I harvested that from my previous life and used it for Commandant Blunt, or, as he's known to one and all, but not when they can hear him, Commandant Bastard.
Yeah, that's fair. But part of it is, again, and this is because I watched and read a lot of Richard Sharp. Wasn't the very opening book of Sharp talked about when the English want to honor somebody of courage, they call him a proper bastard?
Yeah, there's a legendary story of the Australian cricket team against England. England were touring Australia, and they had a very posh captain, Douglas Jardine, who's loathed in Australia because he was snooty, thought the Australians were jumped-up colonials. This was in the 1930s, about 1930. He went into the Australian dressing room after one day's play, because the games go on for 5 days, as you know. And he went in and he complained to I think Bill Woodfull, the Australian captain. I could be wrong about that. He said he went in to complain that one of the fielders out there, when he'd been batting, had called him a bastard. And Woodfull looked at his men and said, "All right, which one of you bastards called this bastard a bastard?"
That's excellent. I dated an Australian for a bit, and didn't they almost split from England over cricket?
That would have
Like,
been then. That would have been part of it. Well, they are their own country.
well, also I understand that they had the best batsman, but England had the best bowler, but it
Yes, yeah.
kept picking body line, which
This bodyline, this is exactly the bodyline tour. It's notorious.
yeah,
And
so
there's another,
that's also where we all learned the phrase, "That's not cricket."
well, and there's another famous occasion from the bodyline tour where Douglas Jardine, the captain, was in the outfield, so he's very near the spectators. And Australia, as you know, is full of horrendous insect life. And so he's swatting away at the flies in the field. And someone in the audience said, "Oi, Jardine, leave our flies alone."
Nice, nice. I mean, that's kind of true of the preparing and running the happy ship is a little bit of a leitmotif through this too in its own way, because our hero Dax is the one with the crew, but he cares very much that people are happy and achieving their best goals. And he prepares and he thinks about things. And in a lot of ways, I loved that in this one, they thought, Dax would think about this. So just by providing that example, he echoed the best behavior onto his crew, as it were.
Yeah, that's definitely some of the feedback I'm getting from readers, people who like the books. Is one person wrote in and said it's so nice to read a book about the value of teamwork, which is part, it's definitely a part of the theme of this. Just step back for a minute. When I finished the first book, it was absolutely obvious to me that in the second book, they can't all go around in a clump together. They've got to separate. And that's the way that, by the way, you create scripts. You do an A story and a B story and a C story if necessary and cut between them. That way you allide time. So I have our 4 companions go off in different directions on 4 different tasks before they join up, if they are ever going to survive them. That's the idea, to survive in this land where everyone's out to get them. And so you can cut between them. And so I do tell this book sometimes in third person and sometimes in first.
Well, the Ghost Ship was a particularly lovely setup. Anybody out there who's ever loved the Disneyland ride, Pirates of the Caribbean, will be right on board with you.
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. There's nothing like a raggedy old ship turning up out of nowhere.
Absolutely, with your name and an engraved invitation.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that
Yeah.
what we wanted? We want to be the special person invited to ride the Ghost Ship.
Right, and you, of course, set off with the best intentions and realise you've been suckered into a tricky situation where, as I said, in this new land, well, new realm, they go to a new realm and get up to new adventures. Both sides, the good side and the bad side, are out to get them. So there's nowhere safe. It was a fun setup when it emerged.
Well, it also, you had the idea of doing the right thing, not just the successful thing. I'm just going to say, in world events today, that is amazing. And it brings up the question, what does winning look like to an emotionally mature person?
Yeah, you mentioned the word the hero's journey beforehand, but there are all sorts of heroes. There's flawed heroes and untrustworthy heroes and evil heroes. These are my people, and they behave with decency and consideration. Oh, well, not to their enemies, of course. get splattered whenever necessary. But one of the rules of writing fantasy is that the villains are always far more powerful than the heroes. And the heroes are struggling to figure out how to survive, let alone win. Yeah, I mean, we're on the side of right. And especially as they're caught in this eternal war between the gods and demons. And which side do they choose?
Exactly.
The other side wants them to lose, and and they're hunted by the good guys and working for the bad guy, and they're stuck and separated and lost. It's fun having these challenges, and if you throw them at people who've got a shred of decency about them, as our guys do, they do their best to work it out. Spoiler alert, Jeannie, when we get to book 3, there is a moment that arises after about a dozen chapters where all is revealed. That she's a sort of a seer who starts spouting this verse. Very simple, all one syllable
Marnie,
words.
we like Marnie.
No, it's one of Marnie's colleagues. Marnie's in the room at the time. She's the one who says, "Well, you've been told. It's all there in front of you. There it is. If she says this, she's a seer. Oh, if she says so, that's your answer. You've got to work it out." And you look at it and you think, well, that's what it says. What on earth does it mean? And of course, as you know, Dax, our hero, has a bit of a problem at the end of book 2. He's got to sort that out as well.
I mean, now I'm sort of looking at the whole, you just suddenly gave me a flash of a weird idea of a gambler as seer. And is a seer anything other than somebody who plays really good attention to all the plot threads and everything around them and can do math fast in their head.
Oh no, no, no! She just listens. She's actually called. She's. I think I call her an auditor. So she just
Oh,
listens and hears, and she suddenly starts speaking in this meeting where the four or five of them are sitting around a table figuring out what on earth to do. And she suddenly starts speaking, and Marnie's just thrilled. And this thick stuff of nonsense comes out with very simple words.
yeah.
And Marnie says, "Well, there's your answer. That's it." And Dax is going, "But I don't understand a word of it." Well, go off you go and figure it out. And it gets more and more and more complicated. And those are the fun things to work out. But book three took a lot of backwards and forwards until, and then look when you finish it, you go, "Oh, of course, that was easy." But going forwards, I must have got up several wrong alleys, which I had to backtrack and say that didn't work. That's not where the story goes.
Interesting. If I may get into the technical process you have there? I don't remember asking. Do you just dump it all into a file and write as you go, or are you a scrivener breaking it into blocks and ideas, or do you outline? How did you come through this?
You do both. You write and go ahead and see where it takes you. Well, tonight I'll be sitting down to write my 500 words, and I don't know what they're going to be. I know where I left off. I know where the situation is, but I don't know what's going to happen in the next 500 words or more if I get going. But you know vaguely. And at the same time, I create synopses and I create an outline so that there'll be another file in which each chapter is summarized in 2 or 3 lines saying so-and-so goes somewhere and does something, or, to basically events. And that assembles itself as we go along. And in book 3 again, New Rock, New Rules, there was one scene I had this, I go, oh, I cannot wait to write that scene. It's one of these big set piece fun scenes.
Right.
Like, you remember in New Rock, New Roll, there was that party at the Orcs stronghold
Yes.
where they got there and they all had a great time. And that was one of those set piece scenes where everyone's, So there's another similar thing where there's this set piece, which of course they have to do, otherwise they won't be able to allowed to go any further. And I just couldn't wait to write it. So, and you're going to love it. I'll tell you why when we're off the air. But they have to go through it to do it. So I wrote it. And then it was like 6 chapters ahead of where I was. But so by the time I got there, it was already written. And that day's work was easy. So I just went through it and made sure that it dovetailed. So sometimes you jump ahead. And if you have the idea, you've got to write it down. You can't let it just drift away. You write it as soon as you have it. That's why you have a notebook by the bed.
I understand that entirely. I have one that I've outlined for myself. Again, I've got my. I love to hear you say 2 sentences because that's like, yeah, here we cross the ocean. Here we.
That's something like that. Yes.
It's a long. Okay, the train trap. Yeah, but we got to stop and do this. And then there's this one scene that I am dying to write, and find him like, why do I need to hold it away from myself?
Yes, exactly.
Like candy?
Write
Why
it
don't
down.
I enjoy it?
And when you get there, you'll go, oh yeah, great, and then you can polish it. That that lovely moment when you've got the first draft of a book done, and you can go, right now we start. Now we start to get the gold, and then of course I do my polish and send it off to the editor, and I get her notes, and she's brilliant. Leslie Robin, she's very well known in the fantasy world, and she gives amazing notes and comes up with all sorts of great ideas. And that's when you really, I've got my assembly is solid. The story structure's there. Let's go.
Well, it is very much about an idea of personal transformation. This one,
Yes.
you have illusions, you have transformation, you have Dax gets new mods, new curse, new blessing, as it were. Both. I even love Little Guy, your dog.
Oh, I love Little Guy. Yes.
Little Guy,
I teased someone the other day. I said, well, of course he dies in book 2. And they go, what? You can't. No, I'm not that sort of writer. When they say in the writing, you must be prepared to kill your darlings, I have to point out to people that doesn't mean kill your favorite characters. That just means get rid of the bits of writing you're particularly pleased about because they don't fit in the book and rewrite them. But that doesn't mean you have to kill your favorite characters.
Yeah, you're not writing tragedy. Tragedy's where the dog dies.
Well, what's it Mel Brooks said? Tragedy is when I cut my finger on a piece of paper. Comedy is you falling down a manhole, breaking your neck and dying.
Yeah. You're not entirely wrong there.
No, well, there was an English science fiction writer, critic, who read the book, the first one. He's on the second one now. I'm interested to see what he says about it. But the first book, he said, because of my background as a comedy writer, he was slightly worried that I might be doing a spoof and taking the mickey out of the genre, which he loves. And he said, no, it's nothing. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a proper adventure. But there's a lot of comic elements in it. So he came up with this term fantasy, which I like rather
I like
like.
fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy.
It's sort of like, it is similar to the idea of the cozy fantasy that Travis Baltry's been doing.
Well, David Green, who's the head of the British Fantasy Society, he did a class on cozy fantasy at the British Society in October, which I attended. I was in the audience along with other people, and he
Delightful.
took us through the whole thing of. I thought the word cozy was a little bit patronizing until he explained that no, it's not. It's comfort food. It's what we love. It's
Well,
what
I
you go
mean,
back to.
Agatha Christie wrote cozy mysteries.
Exactly. It's a word that has, it's like using the word gay to mean something else. The cozy now means, it doesn't mean thin and twee. It means safe. It means not horror. It means not atrocity porn.
It means that you're not going to watch a body get, pushed onto spikes. It just means that
Yeah.
you might
And there's,
find a body that somebody else did, but it's not the visceral horror, chills, thrills.
well, that, and it's always over egging the pudding when they do that.
Yeah.
My daughter's a great fantasy reader and has turned me on to a lot of excellent books. But one she turned me on to, I thought started really well. Great character, great setup, great training sequence. And then when they went off to the campaign, it turned into atrocity porn. It was just
Yeah.
so graphic. And I just stopped reading. I said, I don't care about this. And I think the writer then, like betrayed me. He or she had fooled me into.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of different of if I go into it knowing, like, you watch Hannibal on TV and you're expecting graphic and icky, but you're not always expecting graphic and icky. Like, The Boys caught me by surprise a little bit with the ultra violence of it.
The which one?
The Boys, that was the superheroes. What if Superman was basically a crazed lab creation with all the powers and no moral law?
Oh, right. I haven't seen that. Yes, I thought you were referring to something in the New Rock series, but
No.
I haven't seen that, so I don't know.
You have different leitmotifs than that. Yes, you do have a character that could be considered like some of that, ultimate power. I love that you pointed out that good and bad both have to give up their mind, their power, their nature. That was extremely cool as a neat twist.
Well, thank you very much. It was. It did definitely develop, and if you said earlier it's about transformation. Well, actually, the very first chapter of the very first book is a transformation, isn't it? And they're off into on this new rock, this new planet, and they're new selves. They happen to have designed them themselves as.
I mean, I'm thinking of it. If
Before
you and I got dumped there, I'm a 55-year-old woman. If you want to dump, but you're going to dump me in a younger body and then throw me in the Marines or something.
Well, I'm a 55-year-old woman too, as you know. Well,
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
bit of a
So,
secret. So yeah,
yeah.
but he's delighted. I mean, Dax is delighted to be young again.
Oh yeah.
And this is what they do. It's
And he
it's
gets his brain now. So if we could keep our brains, I mean, this is the fantasy for all of us, really. If I want to be me and have my brain and experience and knowledge in something whose knees don't hurt.
apps. That's really true. Yeah, that's good, and that's the appeal of fantasy, isn't it? That you can't write like that in the real world. It wouldn't work. I mean, there are plenty of fantasies set in the real world, but they're fantasies, so the real world rules don't strictly apply.
Like your plea, because you have a plea to kind of for the gods and the fighting to like you're a whole next level. You could squish things. Can you just leave people alone? That works for so many things, for gods, for sometimes for politics. It's a
Oh,
recurring
absolutely. Yeah.
leitmotif.
Yes.
For extraterrestrial powers in their games, stop
So
smiting LA.
it's a lot of people just get their kicks from pushing weaker people around. I
Yes,
name no names, but it's been a fact of history,
a fact of
and I
history.
think we could do without it.
And even I mean, at the end of the first book, when we discover, there are super extraterrestrial forces at work here, I think we can say without leaving anything else. And you find out that that's kind of they're playing a game of their own for their
In a
own.
way, they are, aren't they? And
Yeah.
my character, I think, at one point, Dax says, we're just the grunts on the battlefield. All the decisions are taken at a far higher level than we'll ever know about. We're just doing our bit to save the human race, to do what we can.
But that goes back to the thing I said earlier, winning. What does winning look like to somebody that's emotionally mature?
Yes, yeah,
Not
indeed.
just, hey, I won your chips at poker, but I want you to keep playing with me, so you need to win enough that you're actually enjoying it.
Yeah, it's cooperation. And it gets back to the theme of teamwork that the other interviewer talked about the other day.
And found family. I mean, there's a little bit of
There is that.
heroine's journey too, because I mean, I don't know that it's just heroes and heroines, but we have flawed heroes. The great Shakespearean tragedies. We have all of those, but The heroine's journey is outlined by Kate Elliott, Gail Carriger, etc. You know, there's the descent, the surrogate family, the searching, the delegation of information network, and then the ascent, structured reunions of getting back there. You did write a beautiful heroine's journey for Dex, and I loved that.
Well, thank you. And there are, of course, heroines in it. There's Esmeralda, who everyone adores. There's Krista, who's a very important character who
We love
come,
Chris.
she comes more and more and more into her own during the series.
I like that she adopts a an apprentice, as it were.
Yeah, Jess. And these people, they just pop up out of nowhere. There's one thing that's happening, I hope it happens, is Nyrick and Horm, who are the two Woodskin. I
Yeah.
suppose in another book they'd be elves, but you don't call people elves in my world. You get your head chopped off. That's an insult.
Oh,
So
really?
they're Woodskin, little wiry hunters. And a couple of scoundrels, as you know, they are important in taking Dax off to be sold into the army at the beginning. But there seem to be some short stories emerging. And I think I might write a book, something like The Adventures of Nyrick and Horm, where your little 10-page, 12-page short stories of their escapades, which they get up to, we might make a nice break from the longer books. We'll see if they if I come up with a decent number of them.
Well, yeah, you could even do like individual ones out there and, collect them, I
Oh
think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they're standalone from the books. They're just it's about them doing. Well, they might be telling it to one of our characters, or they might just be living it. But I think that's a whole little sidebar that's open. Sidebar,
Yeah,
side,
sidebar. So I could
whatever.
see that because
That's opened up.
they're real, and there's also you gave us more and deeper into the Woodskin, and
Well, yeah, and their cousins, the kinfolk.
yeah,
So there's this whole universe of things that can emerge, and we are all ploughing the same earth as our predecessors like Tolkien and the Arabian Nights and the Ramayana. We're all working on what's been human culture, but putting our own twists on it. My orcs are nothing like Tolkien's. Mine are much nicer people. I mean,
yours are very much like the. I don't know if you follow Delicious in Dungeon, which is a weakness that I follow on Netflix, but it combines D&D with a Japanese cooking show
oh yes, yes, yeah,
of
yeah,
going through and ooh monsters, we can eat them.
yeah. My daughter loves that one. Yes, it's great.
And and I had just the thought of a similar idea of your orcs are everything has to be a well-rounded character. You can't just say, I mean, isn't
Yes.
two-dimensional boring?
Yes, completely. And these, they're the salt of the earth. There's nothing they like more than a good scrap and a good feast.
Yeah.
And practical people, and that's part of. And one of the things I love about books when I read them and when I write them is when a character tells backstory. It happens in the first book when we learn the backstory of Esmeralda's birth, and it happens in the second book when Murrock tells Grell how orcs came into the world, and you get this lovely sort of sense of history going back a long time. I always enjoy those moments.
I mean, you could do one for the first book you had where Krista came and was training on in this new place. You have a whole realm that I kind of hope we go to eventually
I
because
I hope we get there as well. Yes, it's fascinating. Yeah, that was as I said, the first thing to make sure was that they're not all in a clump together. So Krista actually disappears from the first book for quite a while until she reappears because obviously she needs to. But you've got to keep people thinking, well, when's she coming back again? What happened to her? And the other two, when they find each other, they're going, well, I hope Krista's here as well because my God, we could do with her because she has skills that they don't have. So yes, you've got to keep the tensions going. But I love Krista; she's a great character. The funny thing is, in the audiobooks, which I do myself, some of my accents are fine. I can do the English ones, I can do the Australian ones, but my American accent, I've lived in California for 30 years, but my American accent for an Asian American girl is not perfect. I sort of, I do my best, and the producer's kind, says just go for it. He did the Game of Thrones book, so he says, just, everyone wants to hear what the author sounds like, so don't worry about it.
absolutely, absolutely. Although if you ever need it, like half of my front line on my hockey team is I have Asian girl from Singapore and one from
Yeah.
Hong Kong and one from so like I can get you the wide variety. Like there's nothing funnier than two girls on the same team puzzling over is that Mandarin or Cantonese? Pretty sure it's
Well, this is we're not specified as to what part of, as she says, well, a big place, Asia. That's about as far as she's going to tell you. But she's obviously an American born and bred.
I also wanted to because it crossed the desk and we talked last time about your writing as a comedy writer. I want everybody to know that you wrote Rowan Atkinson's #1 script.
That is, I know it's extraordinary
That
because
is so
his,
cool.
well, Rowan's writing partner since his student days was Richard Curtis, who went
Right?
on to has still having an extremely distinguished career. Just got an Oscar for services to comic relief, an honorary Oscar, and he's a top class writer himself, and has been since his student days.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be working with Rowan right after Rowan left university. I'd left a couple of years earlier with my writing partner, and we were put together to do a three-person show in Hampstead Theatre, which is a good fringe theatre, one of the top fringe theatres in London. Good director Michael Rudman, and it was Peter Wilson, my partner, Peter's wife at the time, Ellie Walker, and Rowan. It was built around Rowan. And I thought, well, I can't just write for my friends. I better write something for I woke up one morning, I better write something for the new guy. That was the exact words. So I wrote the list of silly names and typed it up and gave it to Rowan. And he sort of grunted and wandered off and thinking, oh. And I was just relieved he didn't say, no, this is terrible. I couldn't possibly do this. And at the first rehearsal, he did it, and there's just me and the director and the audience, I think. And he filled an empty room with invisible schoolboys. It was absolutely extraordinary. I thought, oh, wow, wow, this might work. And
Did
it
you get
did.
to sit back and say, this is what success feels like? Because that man makes me amazing.
Kind of, but that sounds a little smug. No, it's just no, it's just this works. It's a sense of relief, and then of course when it's done, whenever you're rehearsing comedy, after a couple of weeks, everyone is miserable. You think, oh God, why did I sign up for this? It's no good. The actors are all going around saying this isn't funny, and coming up to me and saying, can you change these lines? But as soon as you put it in front of an audience, of course, they haven't heard the jokes that the actors have been hearing over and over again for the 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal.
It's
So
fresh.
suddenly it comes to life, and you go, it works. That's the relief. And then Rowan did it, I don't know, 3 weeks, I think. So he must have done it 15 times at Hampstead. Martin Lewis, the producer, and John Cleese, the director of what was later called the Secret Policeman's Ball, saw it. And a year later, Rowan called me up and said, John Cleese just rang and he wants me to be in his new charity show. And can I do the schoolmaster? So I said, you certainly can. So, we met in a pub, walked down to the Her Majesty's Theatre. I met John Cleese. Rowan introduced me to him on stage, and I watched the rehearsals. All the people like Pete Townsend, and in fact, Martin Lewis was telling me just the other day when this came up. He lives in LA now. Said, Pete Townsend was his idea. He wanted to get rock stars into the show. And Townsend came on with his acoustic guitar after Rowan had done the schoolmaster. And nobody had any idea who Rowan was. He came on an unknown and walked off a star. I mean, just held the audience in his hand. He's
Yeah,
that good. He's an amazing performer. And Pete Townsend, the Who, big star.
I know he is.
Yeah, absolutely. He came on with his guitar and he said, follow that? Rather sweet. But I was sitting in the audience, and the moment Rowan came on, I thought, these people are in for a treat. And
Yeah.
it's lovely to be part of that. He had his 70th birthday a couple of weeks ago, which is why The Guardian wrote this piece, in The Guardian, no less.
Okay.
Rowan's 10 best film performances, not TV, because obviously Blackadder, not the 9 o'clock news. Um, Mr. Bean was TV, wasn't it? I mean, that's amazing
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And it went through from 10 to 1, and the schoolmaster was #1. The guy said, but the real genius is the schoolmaster sketch. I go, God, be called real genius in the Guardian. It's only 45 years later. Of course, by association, because if you think about it, if I'd given that script to someone else of a mediocre or good talent, it might just have been sitting in a bottom drawer gathering cobwebs like a lot of old scripts. But because it hit Rowan and it was a good fit, Chekhov said, I write one thing, the actor writes another thing, together we make a play. That's exactly what happened. I gave Rowan the words, he said my words, he created his own character, he did his own interpretation of it, and it fitted.
Well, it's a spectacular illustration of the combination of yes, nothing great ever succeeded without a bit of luck,
Yeah.
and how much you make your own luck by doing the thing to start with.
You've got to do your own thing to start with. I mean, more luck involved in that Martin Lewis and John Cleese happened to come to see that little show, and word was out about Rowan. Everyone's saying this is the new Peter Sellers when he was still at college. And then Martin was looking for new talent because the previous shows they'd done for Amnesty, they'd had big stars in them, just the establishment, and Peter Cooks and Dudley Moores and people like that, the Pythons. For this one, they're looking for the next generation. And Martin said, we got really lucky with Rowan, and the Schoolmaster was the standout sketch at Hampstead. That was the obvious thing to get him to do. And then it was directed by Roger Grafe, who fought tooth and nail with ITV, who did a 50-minute film of a 4.5-hour show. Roger went to bat for us, and he said, look, he's the best thing in it. And the ITV executive said, yeah, but he's a complete unknown. We're having to leave out XYZ famous people. And Roger stood his ground, and it was in the film. And then later in the 100-minute version, the unexpurgated version. So all those, if Roger hadn't gone to bat for it, it wouldn't have been in the film, and no one would have seen it. So that's the luck that we had along the way.
And did you write all of the versions of it? Because
No, this is great fun. Rowan had to do it in his one-man show.
Right.
1.5-man show. He usually had a stooge like either Richard Curtis or Angus Dayton, I think. Both competent, obviously very good performers in their own right, but Rowan is the man. It was his party piece by then. It was his encore number. It had been in the Secret Police's Ball. It was famous. And I'll do a sidebar story in a minute about this. And he just had to do it. And obviously after doing it for a few years, he must have got bored with it. So he wrote, I don't know if he wrote it, presumably him and Richard wrote a rude version, a naughty version. And someone called me up and said, Rowan's doing different words to your sketch. So I went, what? And so I called his manager up and said, look, copyright resides with the writer, not with the performer. And he went, oops, yep, sorry. And Rowan called me up and said, oh, Richard, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think, because by then,
right.
As far as he's concerned, as far as the world is concerned, it's the Rowan Atkinson Schoolmaster sketch, which is exactly what you want people to think. You don't want them looking through the performer thinking, who wrote this? You don't want them looking through Hamlet saying Shakespeare. You want them to look at all the many good Hamlets I've seen in my life, all different.
Yeah.
David Tennant's Hamlet, or Nicol Williamson's Hamlet, or Ian Holmes' Hamlet, all different.
Deeply Derek Jacobi's Hamlet.
Oh, yeah, he was so good. Yeah. Michael Pennington was amazing.
Well, I haven't seen that one.
David Warner. I mean, they're just brilliant. But back in the old days. So Rowan said, oops, so sorry. He called me up. I didn't think. And so they just cut me in on half the royalties for doing nothing, which was nice. I mean, and then there was a third version done in a show that I produced for MenCap, the mental health charity, in 1981, I think. And that was Mel Smith directed that from Not the 9 O'Clock News. Mel was also in Princess Bride, if you remember that film.
I do.
Well, who doesn't? Great film. And so there was a third version, but the original is the one that people usually associate with it.
I was thinking there is a cinematographic sweep to your novels that could lend themselves to, I don't know if it's a television, a series of movies or a television series, but there was part of me that was pondering that could go in those different ways. But I don't think they could have done it 20 years ago, but they could do it now.
Definitely. Now, that was where we started. The producer who bought the film rights and I were sitting around, he's English, and we were sitting around having lunch in England. And I said, so how many episodes do you want? And he said, the streaming world has changed. People don't really want these wallowing long series so much as they used to. What people really want is a damn good 2-hour adventure. So I said, but this is quite a long book. He said, well, give it a crack. So anyway, the screenplay is 121 pages, which is 2 hours, and 2 hours and 1 minute. The rule of thumb is a minute a page. Yeah. So I got the whole book down to the bare bones, and it actually rattles along. And as to whether anything happens to it or not, well, that's up to him. Obviously the next step is to get the elements and get the money and you need the actors, directors, blah, blah, blah. So if anything ever happens to it, I'll let you know. But it would be a standalone film. And of course, if there are all sorts of things that can happen to sequels, they can spin off and become backdoor pilots, like MASH did. MASH went from being a film to a TV series.
And I love them both.
Well, Larry Gelbart is, one of the great writers who wrote the TV series. So yeah, it is cinematic, and just because of spending a long time in the business, that's just the way that you sort of think about. You think scenes crop up, an event.
Well, I just learned recently that not everybody reads, and as I read, I see a movie. And I learned, had shoved my nose in it recently. Some people read and just see words, but they like the words. Sort of just reminded me that brains can all be very different, can't they?
Yeah, well, we all read differently. I mean, this is why Peter Jackson did such a good job with the
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings series, because we all have different pictures of hobbits and ents and
I
Sauron.
have a lot of words for him on what he did with The Hobbit, though.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen it. I didn't want to,
Don't
but
do it.
a very good job to just
The
to sort of
the dwarf
synthesize.
elf romance angle is
Oh,
just the what who
oh
put
no,
that in?
really? Oh God. Well, I suppose it's romantasy, isn't it? Which is having a moment. But well, there's love interests turn up in later volumes of my stuff, but I don't do the romantasy type scenes.
No, no, no.
It's not
Actually,
it's
I
not that
wonder.
kind of
I
writing.
sort
But
of have a little thing in my head that I've got bets, and I love when I place bets for myself to be answered later. So you're gonna have to. When is that next one hitting the newsstand?
the next one, I believe, is going to be Halloween night itself in Brighton, England, which is the World Fantasy Conference and the British Fantasy Conference have merged this year, and so it'll be in my native country, which will be nice, and we're going to launch it there.
Well, crap!
But
I'll have to go.
well, perhaps I should send you a sneak preview copy before it goes to press, so that you can write something nice about it.
I would absolutely adore to write something nice about it, and
Oh,
not
great!
to mention we'll have to have you back to talk about it again.
Oh, I'd love to. Well, Leslie, my editor's working on the developmental edit at the moment, so when I get her notes, I'll do a polish. So if we're not running short of time, if we get it done in time, should be able to. I'll let you have an advance copy, and it'll be in your computer a PDF. It won't be a book,
Right.
so you can take a look at it and tell me what you think. Because I just love the villains. Two of them in book three. There's the most entitled, arrogant, charming, aristocratic, like the man who owns everything, and you just want him to get his comeuppance so badly, and huge threats, huge. It was such fun coming up with these. But villains are fun to write.
Dylan should be fun to write. We were just my goalie and I were just talking as she is starting to write her very first stories in her very first book, and she has a lovely idea. And I said, from something that I read in the Mystery Writer's Handbook, I'm like, what is your bad guy doing at all times? You need to know that. I mean,
Yeah,
he's not just sitting around, reading the paper all
interesting.
the time. He's got to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's got his wheels in his wheels are in motion, aren't they? That's a good line.
Yeah, we're gonna have to sit down and talk about because there's so much one could talk about for bad guys and villains. We might do a whole episode on it. These things are important, and I love your villains for that. They're thwarted. When you think about it, when you start making them so big, they've lost their common touch anyway, haven't they?
Yeah, but there's no, again on book four. It's a totally different villain from the ones in book three.
Yeah,
Totally different level,
yeah.
totally different size of. I mean, still deathly threat, but instead of being universal, it's just I mean, it's really personal. It's very nasty,
Oh,
personal.
even better, because
Yeah,
that
but
answers without answering my pet peeve of the if every time in every book the villain has to get bigger and bigger, sooner or later you're like throwing planets around, crashing, and that gets boring for me.
yeah, that's the Marvel. That's why they have problems with that franchise. The trick is, and I learned that in the TV world, the rule is pretty much if it works, do it again. In
Yeah.
sitcom, you try and end up back where you started, so you can do another season of it. Uh, but these books, yes, they're the same but different. But they're also you have to keep making them different enough so that they're fresh, but not so different that people go, "Well, this isn't what I wanted."
Well, I'll suck up and say I'm interested in your slug line just to
This time it's personal. I'm trying to remember what the. Oh well, I'm not going to tell you the slug line for book three because that would give away
no,
the
no, no.
well, the situation that we have at the end of book two, you know that our hero's got something that he needs to sort out.
He really does.
So, but so anyway, I can't tell you the slug line because that would be a spoiler for anyone who
Nope,
it's
nope,
much better to read the
entirely.
book and get there yourself.
And so everybody does need to read this book. It is fabulous. It is published by Do they say Kasich?
Kasich,
SF&F?
yeah.
It's
Kasich, yeah,
Kasich.
it's the science
It's
fiction of
under Arc Manor Publishing, and we will put links to the fascinating things we discussed during this episode on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. Thank you so much for coming and joining us again, Richard. It is always delightful fun.
It's so nice, Jeannie. As I was telling you earlier, it's the first round of books because I was an unknown author, maybe an established writer, but you've got to get your nose over the parapet. So with the first book, I was telling people what the book was about and talking about my career as working for people like Rowan or Placido Domingo or Jack Black or whatever, people that I've been lucky enough to work with. But when now people like you who've read the books, basically fans, if I may use that word, and so we're now talking about what's happening in the books, and we've got a whole subject to talk about between us. And if I may just quickly, if you go to richardsparks.com, you can get a free chapter of each book to download, PDF, or you can get a free audio chapter from each book with me reading them. So there are actually 4 chapters out there. So you can get a taste of what the adventures are like and see if it's for you. And if it is, well, come on in, the water's fine.
Absolutely. And I will follow up and make sure that I have all of your social media links so that anybody can just come right to our episode page and stalk you and read all of your books because they're fabulous.
And you can communicate with us there. It goes to my scribe goblin, who actually makes an appearance in book 4. She's a great character, but so she's my assistant. She fields all those things, and with lots of nice correspondence going back and forth.
Excellent. Well, you've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web magic is cast by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are David Welsh, John Schmidt, and Ksenia Chernyevskia. Our intro and exit music are performed by Michael Engberg, who lives down under in Hervey Bay and runs Tin Can Music School. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs, The Bean Scenes, Arm Street out of Kharkiv, and wherever you like to take your notebook and write. And hey, thanks so much for listening.